Hi, this is Kathi Quinn with Floriani. Floriani is a division of R&K Distributing, and I want to welcome you to this week's Project of the Week. Well, I was up at a quilting situation in Ruidoso, New Mexico last week, and we had a fabulous time. It's a beautiful shop, lots of quilt fabrics, fabulous customers, and lots of fun. But I want to answer some of the questions that I had there. And a lot of it had to do, it seemed like, with what are the preferences? What are the rules of the house? So let's look at that. If we come up to the word tools, left mouse click, and we touch the word preferences, we get up what I call the rules of the house. And it's funny because I got a call from another educator last week as well. They couldn't remember how to do something in here. And I'm going to tell you, if we don't use it every week, it seems like it kind of drifts away. So let's look at our preferences. Now, the first thing we're looking at is default style is normal, and that's just the page that comes up normally to open a design on, to create on. Now, if you drop this down, you can pick some of our save to sew settings are in here. So if I know that I'm going to work on satin, I could pull up the satin page I didn't digitize or I digitized, and it would go ahead and the same thing that save to sew does, in the respect that it would go ahead and create that page more to satin, with the settings to satin, more than normal. But we're going to just stay at normal because we do have save to sew, and since it does change our digitizing to reflect the fabric, but it also tells us exactly what stabilizers to use and videos on the stabilizers if we don't understand what it's talking about. So save to sew is the way you want to go if you're going to change. I'm going to save this for satin, I'm going to save it on a towel, whatever. You always prefer save to sew. But that's what that box means. Now you can save a default save format. That means when I go to save a design, it will default to whatever machine format I have chosen. Now I also tell it to auto save in WAF format. To me, that is very important because that's our information file. So I would save a file in my machine format so I could put it on a jump drive and stitch it out. But I would also save the WAF format because what that does for me is it's an information file, and if I want to bring that up and change things in it, it keeps all the original digitizing information. Then hoop bracket location, the majority of us have it on the left, unless of course you have a Janome, it's going to be on the right, or you can put top or bottom. Now color match on loading. Now I can pick a thread palette, and there's lots of thread palettes in here. Now I assume everybody wants to use Floriani Poly. However, you may have bought an embellished matte thread set, and now any design that loads, you want it to load and use the embellished matte thread sets. Or there is all kinds of other thread palettes in here. I'm going to go with Floriani Poly because that's my default. And you want it to say color match on loading. That means when it comes up, whether it was digitized in Madeira, Robinson Anton, Isacord, whatever it's saved in, it's going to match it to the closest color in the Floriani palette because that is what I have selected. And I always like convert to outlines on open. Now the other one that's real important in here is we're going to go to view. In here, the first thing that is important is the highlight selection. Now the default is kind of a pale blue, but I want that to really stand out when I highlight a section of the design, either to change the color, the shape, delete, add to. I like to pick garish pink because I'm not much of a pink person, so chances are I'm not going to have a lot of pink in my design. But if you don't like any of these, you can go to more and you can select any color you want for your highlight selection. So show crosshairs in input mode. Now I deselect that one. That one is difficult for me. And what that does, if I select it, when I start digitizing, I will have large crosshairs that will move. And while that helps you with being very pinpoint accurate, for me it's more difficult. But everybody works in different ways. That is why we have the preferences. Now this show tool tips in input mode, I love that because when I bring up a design, it brings up all my quick edit tools, my copy paste, my group. It's got several little items there that you can use if I want to go to edit. Instead of having to go file edit or come over here and pick the tool, I just have quick selections right around my design. Show backdrop below grid, that means it's kind of behind it, not on top of it. Show selection controls, we love those. That's to make it bigger or smaller or to rotate it. Now this one, when you load your software, this is selected. It's lock properties and sequence view. It means that I cannot close either one of these. And that's a plus because you can't accidentally close them and lose them. But for me, it's also a negative because sometimes I like to close my properties so I can see my sequence view better. So I deselect that one. And show notes in the sequence view, we can put those in and draw selection size. That's when I can draw a box around it with my magnifying glass so I can get in there to select it. Now I'm going to close this and I'm going to show you a couple of these things that I'm talking about. First of all, let's just bring in a design. So I'm going to bring in this design. Now if I select the design, you'll notice what I was talking about in that I've got my quick tools. Here is my copy paste. I'm going to ungroup this design. If I want to zoom in, if I want to lock it so I can't mess with it, if I want to move it around, if I want to pan, if I want to rotate, I've got all these little quick selection tools here. It also gives me my height and width, which I love. Now you notice when I selected, it's that bright red, bright pink. That is my highlight selection that I selected. Now you will notice here that because I deselected to lock my properties in sequence view, I can close my properties and I can see more of my sequence view at one time. That is my preference. When I want to put my properties back up, I just come right up here to the top and left mouse click and get my properties on. So I've got that comes right back up here. Now if you notice, this says Floriani Poly 535 Golden Poppy because when I brought this design in, it matched to the closest colors in the Floriani palette. Now this is a design, one of our free designs, so obviously it was also digitized in the Floriani palette. But had I picked my embellished matte thread, when I loaded this, these would all be embellished matte colors to the closest possible match. Now when I say that, sometimes you have shades in one thread palette and you don't have the exact shade in another. So it's going to go to the closest palette. Now because I'm going to go to File, Save to Sew. Remember I told you to use that instead of changing your template, how it loads. We picked normal. But see, now I could come in here and I could go to that satin. So I'm going to say satin, I didn't digitize, and I want all the new style settings that are in that template to be added to this design. Now when I go to next, what makes this important that I use this, what I like about it, is that when it comes up, Now it's going to tell me not only did it change it to that satin template and redigitize the design for satin, it's also now telling me exactly how to stabilize it. And remember, I said if you don't know how to stabilize, it says first put Floriani Dreamweave on the back of that satin. If I don't know what that is or how to use it, I'm just going to left mouse click on watch video, and a video is going to come up showing me exactly how to use Dreamweave. Then I would go ahead and use Heat and Stay on the back, or I could stick it down to Floriani Perfect Stick, and then it would talk about how to top it down here, and it would also tell me the needle. Now when I finish this, because I told it that I want to save, on mine I had defaulted to the Brother Bernina Pez format, so it came here automatically. Now of course, let's say, well, you know what, I want to save this for my Janome. I would just bring this up and I would go ahead and go to my Janome format. There's my Janome format. Or I could say, you know what, I'm going to save this for my Viking. So even if I didn't pick that as my default because I may have more than one machine brand, I can still drop this down and select another format to save in. So let's go to the Viking. Then I would put my name of my design and save it. Now remember, I also told it to auto save to the WAV format. So it's going to save two files, one to the Viking and one to the WAV. So if I want to change anything in that design, I would bring the original information file, which is the WAV file, back up. Then I can change anything in it and save it again. So that's important. And remember, I told you I want to have notes in here. So let's look and see what that means. Notes in here means I could come in here and click on this and say, this is pumpkin piece 1, let's say. I can go ahead and I can put notes in here, and then it would save it this way as well. So this is a real nice feature that I selected in that preferences. So let's come back here to tools. Let's look at preferences real quick. So again, I had normal. I had the Brother Baby Lock selected, and that's what it defaulted to. There's my autosave WAV. I've got my color match on loading and my Floriani palette. We're going to come to view. I had my highlight selection here. I deselected my crosshairs, my tool tips. So there was my little tool tips. I had my show backdrop. I didn't show that. My selection controls. I deselected lock properties box, so it would be here. And so you can see that you have total control over how your program acts day after day by going into your preference box and setting those things up. And we'll look at, next week, we'll come back and look at some of the other preferences in here. We'll look at our digitizing. We'll look at some of these other preferences and explain them to you next week. So thank you for coming this week. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Good night.